pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let's take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Roll call.
Mayor Dickey,
Here.
Vice Mayor Spellich, Councilmember McMahon, Councilmember Charno, Councilmember Magazine, Councilmember Friedel, Councilmember Grisbowski.
Present. Thank you, everyone. We'll start, as always, with our reports from mayor, council members, and the town manager. Grady?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. At the last council meeting, you recall that Councilmember Jerry Friedel asked that due consideration be given to the possibility of us reviewing and reevaluating our public meetings. And so I'm happy to let you know that the mayor and I met recently, and based on our evaluation of the infection rates for Maricopa County and also for our own community, and also the vaccination rates, we're really close to about a third or so of our own residents that are being vaccinated or that have received vaccinations. So, and then the infection rate is actually down, I think the last I looked, Mayor, was at 4%? 7%, I apologize, 7%, where it had been really in the double digits the last several weeks. So based on that, we are going to do a few things. One is the council meeting, starting next council meeting, will be open to the public, of course, with face coverings and social distancing. We are also going to have our boards and commission meetings open up to the public, effective tonight. So starting this week, any boards and commissions that would have been scheduled will be again open to the public with social distancing, with the audience the way it's set up here, and also with face coverings required. And then also want to let you know from an organizational standpoint, I've decided to continue the modified work schedules for staff at both Town Hall and also the Community Center. What that means is our employees have staggered their hours so we minimize our impact or interaction with one another in the buildings. However, we are fully open to the public, so there's no impact on service levels to our public. Mayor, was there?
There's just a few more things. I'll let everybody go.
I'll let
and then
you.
I'll kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, that's all I have at this point.
Okay, thanks, Grady. Anybody else have anything to report from? Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mayor. I did attend a Zoom meeting on planes and cranes that was hosted by
Lego?
yeah. It was interesting because what we learned about Arizona and Phoenix in general was the fact that at the worst, we were down 90% in air travel. We held up much better than the rest of the country because what they were saying was that our business environment, people like leisure and space and the weather. So as of April last year, we were down 90% in air travel, according to the TSA. This year in December, we were down about 50%. So we've recovered better than a lot of the country because of the reasons I just mentioned. I also attended a ribbon cutting ceremony for Pearl Nutrition on Palisades. Tim and Sarah have a nice operation there, and they offer protein shakes, protein waffles, very low sugar content. So if you're looking for a nice healthy alternative, it's a new business in town and wonderful people there. So, thank you.
First of all, did I hear waffles? I also attended the same planes and cranes. There were no cranes mentioned, so I was a little disappointed by the actual title of the event. But one of the things that one of the airline local bigwigs said was international travel in the foreseeable future will probably require the COVID card. He didn't mention countries, but he did specifically say international travel. So I found that very interesting. But the meeting in its entirety was very interesting. And then the only other thing I did was legislative calls with the Arizona League of Cities and Towns.
Thank you. The, speaking of international, so I always say California, the Canadian Arizona Business Council met, their quarterly meeting, and we're continuing to discuss, as always, economic possibilities and opportunities now and post-COVID, and a lot of that has to do with that international travel. Also, MAG had the regional council, and that's very heavy on transportation, as you all know. We had our retreat on the 23rd, and it's online, and we were here, so I think you can actually see and hear everything. All 7 hours of it, so, but you know, it was a lot of good conversation, and really appreciate it, as always. The COVID relief bill that passed through the House of Representatives and is in the Senate has ramifications to cities and towns and states, so we'll see what that ends up looking like. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Mayor, I apologize because I was going to speak on this, so I appreciate you bringing that up. So to the mayor's point, there is a $350 billion earmark for state and local governments in this, which is about a fifth of the total $1.9 trillion price tag. But there's a lot of mayors around the country who are on the bandwagon supporting this. A lot of them are actually very vocal, and they're Republican as well. This is really not a Republican or Democrat issue. It's really it's trying to restore the vitality of the cities and towns. There's a number of deferred capital projects that this important funding will help fund. So this is just keep your fingers crossed. I was just doing the numbers really quickly on a per capita basis, and you know, our state's going to do really well if that happens, and our town may have some infusion of capital dollars that we could use for one-time uses, and if there's any other COVID-related needs that we need to take care of as well. So, but anyways, keep your fingers crossed, because I do think that this is definitely needed in this state with the economy that we've been suffering here.
Thank you for mentioning that. There was like a list of a bunch of mayors, and it was bipartisan, and one of them was Mayor Giles from Mesa, and they, like us, pointed out that with the Wayfair that they haven't done as badly as some because we were able to get those sales tax, but then there's other, as a big city that they do a lot of social programs, and so they haven't been able to do those things. And also, you know, the rental that you would get if you were doing the community center. So we get a little bit back to that. HOAs, I think, groups that meet at the community center will be able to do that. But again, we're limiting the numbers. Some of it is self-limiting because of the size, right? But, you know, we're just trying to struggle to move forward the best that we can. You know, you're going to see ads for the fair coming out, and we just want you to know that, you know, it's our intention or our hope, and we're planning as if we're going to go ahead with it. And, you know, we still have a little bit of time for that, but as Rachel and anybody would tell you, you know, we got to get going if we're going to start doing ads. So everything has a caveat, right? So, but at this point, we're expecting to be able to do that. I just wanted to give you a little bit of follow up a little bit on some of the numbers that are kind of amazing, because in Fountain Hills we had 1,535 cases, and there was a time where we were going up 30, 40 a day, and this is like 6 days and only 8 people. And so, you know, obviously we'd like to have 0. One of the drivers, of course, of the original decision about fares and such had to do with hospital capacity, and that has improved 85%, and that includes all, you know, all patients, not just COVID patients, so that means their capacity has gotten better. You know, that the schools had those 3 metrics that they were that they were judging on how to open, and they were all red for very long, you know, which was called substantial. Now we have our first one that was substantial, which is the cases per 100,000. And if it's 100, then you get to move to the moderate, and we're like at 100.6. So we're right there with that. The second one is that positivity rate, the 7%, which is moderate. And then they're actually in the minimal on the COVID-like illness at 3.8. So those were the three metrics that the schools look at. 62%, and I think it's better now because this has been the same number for many days, of those eligible in Fountain Hills have had at least one vaccine. And as Grady said, 8,164 people, that's about a third of our population has had at least one shot. So we're going to look at, what some of the other cities and towns are doing as we move forward with our music fest and all of the things that we really want to do, but we want to be proper and we want to be careful, and that's the way we'll progress. Last, we got the report about the bollards being cleaned and painted and that they're all done. We want to thank Ted Blank and his band of volunteers there that went down there. I want to thank Paul's Hardware and Sherwin-Williams because they donated the materials that they needed, the tapes and the taping and the paints. And I want to thank our staff because I know this, and our council for approving this. And I think that it seems like it's a really nice experience for people down there walking through there. So we're really happy that is complete, and we appreciate their work for sure. So if there's nothing else, we'll move on to our presentations. Grady?
Okay, we have our presentation, our monthly presentation from Captain Larry Kratzer, who is going to be sharing with you some calls for service and stats. So with that, I'll turn it over to Captain Kratzer.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I will be discussing the stats from 2020 and kind of doing a recap for the year and comparing it with some of the data from years past. So let me start this here. I may have already done that.
Larry was on the screen, and just as you walked up, it just blanked out.
It's my luck. There we go. Okay, we're in business. Okay, so I've got some highlights here that I want to discuss. We'll go through this, but not in extreme thorough detail. All of the council has received copies of this, so if there are any questions, feel free to stop me at any time or wait till the end, whatever works best for you. But I'll just start by highlighting some of the areas as we go through. So you'll see here, I just want to go through a couple of real quick definitions so that people understand when we talk about top 20 calls for service and top 20 on-view calls. A call for service, that's a call that occurs when a resident contacts MCSO, typically by phone, and a deputy is dispatched to handle the call. They also include calls to 911 for emergency assistance, along with calls to the non-emergency number. So that's going to incorporate the calls for service. And then on-view, that's a deputy-initiated on-view traffic that occurs when a deputy initiates dispatch by conducting a traffic stop or other proactive policing event. So when we talk about calls for service or on-view, you'll understand the difference. So quickly, I want to discuss the fact that I think these stats are very clear that Fountain Hills, we enjoy a very, very safe community here. Definitely one of the safest communities in the state. We've discussed this before too, that the FBI doesn't really come out with true rankings of which state or city is the safest. You'll see sometimes in magazines rankings that says, Fountain Hills, the second safest city in the valley. That's a lot of times those are unofficial, a lot of times by private entities that do those rankings, real estate entities and of those sorts. So I've been asked to see if we could find out what our official ranking is, and there's really no official ranking by the feds or FBI or local state jurisdictions. Yes, Mayor.
Just before, with your definitions, would code red be under those calls for service?
I'm sorry, what?
Code red, how would you categorize those that you get on the, that people text a tip or whatever you call it?
Gotcha. That is going to be classified as a call for service. So what would happen is we would get those, the P3 tips, that what used to be called text a tips. Yeah, no problem. And then the deputy would notify dispatch that we're acting on a tip that was provided, and they would enter it in as a call for service, not an on-view activity that the deputy initiated. You're welcome. So recapping that I think the stats clearly show how safe the town of Fountain Hills really is. I just want to recap some of the stats that really prove that. So in the last year or the past 2 years, some of the calls that are down, calls for service that have been down, vehicle crash with no injuries. That's a good one because we've spent a lot of time and effort trying to come up with proactive ways to help minimize the number of accidents, traffic accidents we have in town, and I think some of the strategies that the town has implemented is really working. So vehicle crash with no injuries, it's down, a decrease of 26% from the year before. So in 2019, we had 161 vehicle crashes with no injuries, and last year in 2020, we only had 119. One of the calls I wanted to highlight that is up from last year in the calls for service category is loud neighbors disturbing. So as you can imagine, that's probably come with some of the Airbnbs. But there are some other reasons we kind of speculate as to why that might be. A lot more people are home, a lot more with COVID and everything else working from home. So you're getting more calls. We are seeing more calls for contractors cutting, saw cutting, and those sort of things that people are bothered by. So that could account for some of that. Yes,
I want to
Councilman
go
Reagan.
back to vehicle crash, no injuries. How do you define no injuries? Meaning not going to the hospital or?
So the way that's determined by the deputy. So when they're on scene, if none of the parties involved in the accident report that they're injured in any way. So it doesn't even require a trip to the hospital. If someone says they have back pain or shoulder pain, the deputy would label that as a accident with injury. So that's how that's determined. So these are going to be your fender benders with no injuries, your very minor accidents. But those are something that we do experience a lot of here in town. Then one of the other ones that calls for service that was down last year was thefts. Theft calls were down. In 2019, we had 110 theft calls, and in 2020 we had 75. So that's a decrease of almost 32% in theft calls. I'm going to move over to the on-view activity that patrol and vacation watches. That's when somebody goes out of town and they put a request in to have their house watched, or it's not always that. It could also just be a deputy on patrol going out and checking on a residence or a location. But those are usually because somebody has asked for added patrols. But deputies will also check out on a patrol or vacation watch if they go to let's say the stores or the businesses in the middle of the night and just check doors. So that was up just slightly last year. Traffic violations, those are also on view, deputy initiated. Those were up last year. So 2,419 in 2020 compared to 2,064 in 2019. So that's an increase of 17% from 2019. And I thought it was important to highlight, and we've discussed it, but an increase of 205% from 2018. So we did see a drastic decline in community outreach, community policing activities by deputies, and clearly that was because of COVID-19 and the minimization of contacts with the public to help to not spread COVID.
Captain, on that subject, I was going to ask you about that anyway, but even from 2018 to 19, the number is down quite a bit. So that was before COVID on the community policing. So I just was, was wondering.
Well, and I did look at that. One of the things when I was going through the stats, trying to determine why some of these numbers have increased and decreased, one of the things I could think of in there, and this is the only thing that kind of made sense for me, is in trying to encourage deputies to be more, to do more traffic enforcement. I think, some of those things, when you have them do more in one area, it takes from other areas. There's been a pretty big push for deputies to be involved in the community and do community policing, community outreach functions, and we track those. And the other thing about those are, with the court order we're under and the community outreach that we do, I think in 2018 it was a lot less a deputy could put in there that they're going out on a community outreach thing, and they could have went into Circle K for a drink and put that as a community outreach. Well, we've really hammered down on what those are and the definitions of that. It's contact with the public that's meaningful in regards to community policing. So I think that probably could account for a big drop too in those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. And I know you used to have those coffee things once in a while. Maybe you can bring those back this
Yeah, we're
coming
looking
year.
forward
I
to
mean,
bringing Coffee with the Cop back and getting out there with the community.
Looking at speeders, 691 in 2018, all the way down to 38 in I almost thought it was a misprint. Only 38 speeders?
No, that's the kind of the anomalies with some of the way that these stat reports are pulled. These are all done by analysts in our Bureau of Internal Oversight. So they don't really know what we are exactly looking for at patrol. We try to have good communication as to what would be helpful for us. Some of that is just the way radio type codes have changed in the last couple of years, where they've changed almost like the community policing, where they've changed the way that traffic stops are being designated. So instead of just being broken down by speeders, it might just be a traffic stop in general. So you'll see that even though speeders is down, when you get into the on view page where it talks about what type of traffic stops we had, you'll see that speeders, it was up from last year. So this is kind of an anomaly with the way it records, and I don't know the technical aspect of that, but this is kind of an anomaly there where it shows 38 compared to, and that is a drastic change. So I could see where that would raise some eyebrows. 691
And
2 years
traffic
ago.
violations is way up.
Yes, traffic violations were up by almost 400 from last year and then from the year before. And that's one of the things, when I came in, it was really impressed upon me from council and members of the public that we needed to get back to an emphasis on that. And so, I'm not taking all the credit for that. Again, we've spoke to council several times about the court order and the impact that had on deputies a couple of years ago, and kind of the growth that deputies have had of not being afraid to do traffic stops anymore due to the scrutiny and the oversight and all those things. So there's a lot that plays into that, but they are on the way up again, and deputies are getting back to the basics of traffic stops on patrol, which is important. You're welcome. Okay. So top 20 calls with incident reports. So it can get kind of confusing because I've already talked about the top 20 calls for service by members of the public, and then top 20 on view. Top 20 calls for service with incident reports. So we can go on 500 calls for service in a month, and maybe 200 of them result in an incident report. So it's just based on what when our deputies are taking reports for incidents. So one of the anomalies that you might see here is, like, for example, theft calls in 2020, it shows only 75. It shows 75, whereas reports for theft show 68. And that's because you're going to have people who call in that there would be a theft. Our dispatch would code it that way. When a deputy goes there, the person, may have a valid theft or think it's a valid theft. But if it was a civil matter, an estranged spouse or something that took property that they're fighting over in a court order, it wouldn't necessarily generate a report. It would be a civil matter. And so it's that's kind of what explains the difference in those numbers. But one of the ones that's important here is vehicle crash with injuries. And that was down almost 17% from last year. So we had 35 accidents with injuries compared to the year before with 42. So again, I think that's important because town has been putting a lot of focus on traffic and pedestrian safety. Hit and run accidents were down quite a bit. It was 46 in 2019 and only 21 in 2020. And this is a big one. For property crime, burglary from vehicles was down. And we've had a consistent downtrend for the past 3 years. We had 41 in 2018, 35 2019, and only 23 last year. So we're moving in the right direction there. And all it takes is one big incident like we saw a year and a half, 2 years ago, where we had a neighborhood get hit really hard over a night where we had, 8, 9 vehicle burglaries. And then I highlighted some incidents that may have increased. This is just kind of a theory, and a lot of people have talked about this, but I think we see it in law enforcement, and we kind of connect the dots that it may be COVID related for a number of issues. But we have seen some increases in certain crimes, and we kind of think that it has something to do with COVID. Identity theft, we've seen a lot of identity theft cases over the last year. This was up almost 54% from the year before. Disorderly conduct, an increase of 56% of our calls from the year before. DV fights or mutual combats, an increase of 43%. Assault DV that was a slight increase. We had 27 in 2019 and 30 in 2020. And then attempted suicide, that was an increase of 21%. So those are the kind of the things that we look at and say, okay, you got a lot more people home, a lot more people together, people working from home, not going to work on a daily basis, things that may be impacted by COVID. We're not saying scientifically that it is the case, but when we try to make sense of some of these trends, it's what we kind of put together. This is one that I think is really good news, the major crime indicators. Assaults are up from last year. That's not a good thing, but that's the only one that's up, 101 last year compared to 88 the year prior. But burglaries are down for the past 2 years. Homicides are down. Motor vehicle thefts are down slightly. And thefts in general are down. So those are the major crime indicators at the bottom of page 1 that you'll see. Moving on to page 2, I'm not going to talk much about page 2 because this is just the month of December. So they finished out the month of December stats, and then they gave us the annual breakdown. So there's really nothing on this page that I need to go over in detail unless there was a question on page 2. Page 3, calls for service by month. And this is just something that our analysts do for us to kind of help us with determining manpower and staffing and where we should allocate our resources. May of 2020 was the busiest month for calls for service with 466 calls for service. April 2020 was the lowest month for calls for service with 407. In 2019, just to put it in perspective, the most calls for service in a month were 543. And that was in May of 2019. So May is consistently, the last 2 years, the busiest month. And then the lowest month calls for service in 2019 was 414 in August. So that number is pretty similar year to year. Call for service by day of the week. Fridays and Saturdays are our busiest days of the week. I think we can all understand why that might be the case, with just under 800 calls for service on both days for the year. Calls for service by hour of the day. We find that 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. was the busiest time frame for calls for service. And again, I think we can all understand that. By about 8 p.m., people are getting home and settling down for the night. And the busiest hour of the day is 4 p.m. So again, those are just things that help us determine where to put staffing. Page 4, calls for service by assisting units. I'm not going to go over that because all that doesn't really show anything. That's just our backup units. And there's really nothing in there that is worth highlighting. On page 5, this is our on-view traffic by month. So this is deputy-initiated traffic. And just some of the highlights I have on here is that January of 2020 was the busiest month for on-view traffic. Some of the correlations I think we can make with that is that in January we have a lot of our winter residents or winter visitors here in town. So it makes sense that winter month might be the busier month when we have more people in town. And again, this is deputy-initiated traffic. So some of the reasons why there might be more on-view traffic by deputies is that in January there was less calls for service, so it allows deputies more time to do those proactive activities. And then on-view traffic by day of the week. Thursdays were the busiest day of the week for our on-view traffic. I think a lot of that has to do with our traffic car who is designated to do traffic enforcement. Most of our deputies do traffic enforcement, but we have one deputy who really focuses on that. And Thursdays is one of his main days. Yeah, so slow down for sure on Thursdays. And then if you're interested, 8 o'clock in the morning is the busiest time for on-view traffic, where most of our traffic numbers, the highest amount of traffic numbers came from. And again, the connection there is it's kind of rush hour. People are still going to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. School's starting around that time. And those are times when we expect deputies to be very active and visible. And then page 6, moving to page 6, traffic stops, and I'll hit on this briefly. Speeding violations were up in 2020, an increase of 13% from 2019. So we had 1,603 speeding violations compared to 1,423 the year prior. Non-moving violations were up by 60%. Moving violations were up by 103%. So just real quick, non-moving violations would be your equipment violations, license plate lights, registration issue, but those were up by 60%. Moving violations, that's going to be you're driving with a cell phone, illegal, lane change without signaling, speeding. It wouldn't incorporate speeding because we break that apart. Unsafe lane changes, those were up by 103%. And then suspended driver's license violations were up by 95%. And DUI and criminal speed violations were also up. So that's just showing deputies are being much more diligent in their efforts of traffic enforcement. And then finally on page 7, and then we'll go to some questions if there's any questions by council. This is just our traffic data, our on-view traffic stops by month. January of 2020 was by far the busiest month for traffic stops. By day of the week, Wednesdays and Thursdays were the busiest days of the week for traffic stops. And by hour, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. was the busiest time for our traffic stops where we had the most activity. So I know that was kind of a quick rundown of all these stats and all the information that was provided. But if there, and I'm sorry, I wasn't skipping through these slides as I went, so that probably wasn't very helpful to folks at home.
The packet has it, so if
Okay.
anybody that was watching wants
Okay.
to see it, it's
All right.
online in the
I
packet.
wasn't thinking about that, but that's all I have. If there's any questions or comments from council.
Councilman?
It's the first time I've ever seen anything like this, and it's finding it very valuable. Who compiles this?
We have analysts that they hire that this is their job to just go through and run reports for each district so that the district commanders have them so that they know allocation of resources or maybe where some trends are for crime that we can put resources at. So yeah, it's our, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, the office started hiring analysts for this purpose, and it's been extremely helpful.
It's fascinating.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Cap, this is a great report. I've read hundreds of these. The crime analyst did you a solid. This is a really well put together report. I would really like to suggest that this get put on the town's website so that residents can view this. For people who don't know crime, these year-end statistics would be 1 month in a district in Chicago. So, they're really impressive. And as I spoke before, in the past, the consent decree really hamstrung you guys, and your ability as a supervisor to get the guys to go out there and do their job and do work in this type of environment is really impressive. So I want to tell you, I know you didn't put this report together, but it's just really well done. It's easy to read. Nationally, you see domestic violence cases are picking up just for the fact that people are at home now more. So, but really impressive, and I just wanted to compliment you, and I hope that we can
We will
get
definitely put this
publicized.
online.
And a news story also, if we could get Bob Burns or somebody, or Bo, if we could do a news story on this, because I think the residents need to know just exactly how safe the town is. Thank you.
Point. Thank you, Councilmember Spelch. And I'll work with Grady to make sure we provide all these reports so we can put the year end on the website or whatever mechanism it is that the town chooses.
Thank you. You probably know how to interpret these, you guys do, but it's a little bit hard to know how to interpret. Like, so say, you had a bunch more traffic stops, well, we wanted that, right? So something that might look like it went in the wrong direction actually went in the right direction, or like when you point out the community policing looks like it went in the wrong direction, but there's obviously a reason for that. So we'll put that out there, but I know I looked at it and didn't exactly know how to interpret what the numbers meant. So I'm glad that, David, you're saying, that they are good, and if there's a trend or if there's a something to tell people that aren't in your business how to interpret this, I don't know if there's some way to do that, but we really appreciate it. Obviously, we all the information that's out there, the most transparent that we can get, and it also to know that they can actually file this and put it into some kind of a formula that'll help put the manpower and the woman power where it needs to be is really appreciated. Any other comments or anything? Thank you so much, Captain.
Thank you.
Our next item is our let's see, call to the public. Do we have any call to the public cards? Our consent agenda is next, unless anybody has anything they'd like to remove. I'll take a motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on to our regular agenda. Our first item is a purchasing agreement. Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel's going to give the staff report, but just briefly, this is a contract to allow us to build 3 pickleball sports courts. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Goodwin, who will give you a briefing on this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mayor, Council, originally we did not have a presentation planned for tonight, however, we did have a number of questions that came in, so I have prepared something quickly. Liz, I apologize. You do have a copy of this to be added to our packet. It is brief, and it should hopefully answer any questions that may be lingering. What's a sport court? A sport court is any of our tennis or basketball courts. They all have the same surfacing. They all have a need for regular maintenance and occasional repairs. Most of our courts have been resurfaced recently, but we do need to maintain them. So that includes 2 full court basketball courts at Golden Eagle, as well as 4 tennis courts. We have a brand new full court basketball court at Four Peaks, as well as 2 tennis courts. And now we are considering the installation of 3 pickleball courts. So that would be included in tonight's contract. So speaking of the pickleball, I thought we would take a look at where they will go. This is a image that was taken a few days ago after a number of renovations out at Four Peaks Park. Our efforts have really been focused on the south end of the park, which is sort of near the Boys and Girls Club and the former EVIT building. What you're looking at here used to be a playground. It had swings and some other equipment. However, that was removed. They were pushing 20 years old. They had quite a bit of damage and were irreparable at that point. We have installed a new ADA accessible entry into this side of the park. We've completed a number of sidewalks that has created a 10-foot wide walking loop around the perimeter of the ball field, so it's roughly a third of a mile. We've maintained the shade structures there that you see in the background so that we can repurpose those. We've done a number of irrigation and drainage improvements as well. So just to give you a lay of the land, this is kind of the overview. You can kind of see where the walking pieces have come in, where the new entrance is down there at the bottom, and where the pickleball is proposed. All of this is funded through our CIP. This is a long-term CIP project that's been going a number of years. So the installation of the fenced pickleball courts are part of this year's CIP, so we have the funding. The pickleball courts and the shade canopy are kind of the 2 big items remaining on this year's project. If you recall, we talked about the shade canopy a number of weeks ago, and it's on order, so we're looking forward to getting that up, hopefully before it gets too hot. Rolling into FY22, pending the CIP budget approval, we would continue with these renovations, including adding lighting to the pickleball court, the installation of gaming tables, including cornhole and ping pong in that same area under those shade canopies, the replacement of some of the shade where it has ripped, additional picnic tables, and then granite and landscape improvements in that area. So that kind of gives you a forecast of what's coming up. One of the biggest questions I've actually had is why pickleball? Pickleball courts here were identified as a element for this park for a number of years. We've explored a couple of different options, and with the help of our Community Service Advisory Commission, everyone is in support of the idea of adding pickleball courts, mostly because it is a very, very popular trend. It continues to grow nationally. It's very popular here locally. And we do not have any public access courts here in town. I know that's probably the most confusing part, is there are a number of pickleball courts located near Golden Eagle Park, adjacent to the school. However, those are not within town. They're not under our jurisdiction. They are programmed by the local pickleball club. And so my understanding is that their membership is required for use, except some drop-in times on Sunday. If you've ever been by there, they are swamped, which is great. So we do have an extreme community demand, and we have been working to find the right location for courts. And we added, it was after some consideration and discussion with a number of users and a number of our stakeholders, that we identified this space because it is a bit underused and it is a vandal-prone area in our park. So the idea of adding lighting and a high-use amenity really helps address that secondary issue for us. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions or follow up on any information you might need.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Rachel, the lighting, is it going to be kind of like Golden Eagle where, it shuts off at certain time? Because, I mean, there are homes across the street on Calaveras and such, so.
Yes, it would be, and it will actually be very similar, if not exactly like the lighting that is over at the new basketball court. So it'll be lower level in terms of display, it's LED, and it'll be demand driven so that if no one's using the courts, they'll be off.
Yeah. And then just, how are you going to handle the ping pong tables and such? That kind of threw me for a loop, so talk about that.
The gaming area, we have some very usable space over there, and we really wanted to make it a unique picnic area or family gathering area. So the idea being that if you only have to bring a few things, just like if you bring a basketball to the basketball court, ideally you can bring cornhole bags or a ping pong ball and paddle out there. We had explored some other ideas and we're open to other gaming options. These two seem to fit pretty easily for us and again require minimal supplies. It was also the idea that the Boys and Girls Club would be adjacent and again be able to take advantage of that with again very little supplies, be able to send kids out to play and take advantage of the space under there.
But I mean, with a ping pong table, is it permanently affixed to the
It is.
pad or something then?
It is. I'm sorry.
I haven't seen that, so.
It is. They,
Okay.
and as are the cornhole. They are cement, so they're made for outdoor usage. They are designed for the elements and whatnot, and they obviously will be under those canopies, so they'll have some shade and things like that for protection. But they are very popular amenities in warmer climates, particularly in Florida and Texas areas.
Hi. The pickleball courts, will they be first come, first serve, or on a reservation type basis? How are you going to handle that?
Right now, we would probably put them and use our consistent reservation system just like we do with our tennis courts. So they would be available for reservation with the same set of fees that we use for any of our sport courts. We would have to address if there is classes or there was reserved time for tournament play or something like that, as we do with some of our other courts. But yes, they would be open for reservation pending any other policy changes.
Not directly related to this presentation, but my wife and I, a couple of days ago, were walking behind Euro Pizza. And I was reminded that we had discussed in the past doing something with that land, which is a mess. Is there anything doing?
That's a great question. There has been a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of discussion and a lot of ideas. And to my knowledge, a number of them had support. And then there was some financial ramifications that sort of put a stop to a number of the visions. I know when we've been talking about, through our CIP, we've been talking about the splash pad and renovating the splash pad area and considering an expansion. That was really where we wanted to make sure that we could accommodate the expanded area of the footprint, or the expanded footprint of the splash pad potentially, and then consider if there's a way to add additional seating, additional shaded areas for families and picnicking and things like that, if other ideas aren't proposed at that point.
I'm sorry, I'm not following how that's related to that piece of land.
The splash pad is adjacent to
Right.
that whole, and when we reviewed the upcoming CIP, the splash pad is a proposed project for next year's CIP. Part of that would be increasing the footprint of the splash pad and making it a bit bigger, possibly.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to mention, I think it was my first project on CSAC, was we had a subcommittee about pickleball. And it was months long of meeting with pickleball people and going to various sites and having conversations. And every pickleballer in the world, in Fountain Hills, stopped me in the middle of the grocery store. I assure you, this is something that we need in this town.
Do we have any speaker cards? No? The motion's on page 37, if anybody would like to make that.
I move to approve the cooperative purchasing agreement with General Acrylics Contract 2021-037 in the amount of $129,500.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rachel. Next, Brady?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, this item probably looks familiar to you. We also talked about this recently at the council retreat recently as well. This is the second request for the town council to reconsider a traffic study, a traffic signal warrant study for the intersection of Palisades Boulevard and Eagle Ridge and Palomino Drive. This was originally, when it came before council, it was a little bit of a mishap. We had a staff report that had multiple different evaluations and studies that were involved, but we had all the dollar amounts blended, but we didn't have them broken out by project. And so it was very confusing. And staff was asked basically to bring this back before the Pedestrian and Traffic Safety Committee for its review because of the impact on pedestrian safety at this location. I'm going to turn it over to Public Works Director Justin Weldy, who has additional details about this. I do want to remind the council that when the council approved the development fees, as part of that, there's an infrastructure improvement plan, and this location was identified as one of the key areas that development fees will pay for a traffic signal. So it is identified, and we do have sources of funding that will help ultimately if it comes back that this is meets warrants for a traffic signal. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Weldy.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Madam Mayor and council members, I come to you tonight with my proverbial hat in hand. It's never the intent of us to provide misleading or confusing information. And in November, there was just a lot of information because this project in the intersection of Palisades and Eagle Ridge Drive was also tied to a contract to study the intersection of Palisades and Fountain Hills Boulevard. I simply failed to provide enough detailed information in that to allow you to make an informed decision. I apologize for that shortcoming. As Mr. Miller said, we are back tonight to discuss this. It's important to note that when we are planning for the outlying future and outlying years, especially when it comes to traffic management and pedestrian safety, that we look at intersections, we have some historical data for this intersection tied to two different developments, the now Adero Canyon Resort and another another development that did not move forward on the corner of Palisades and Shea. Based on those traffic analysis, we do believe that we are going to meet one or more warrants for a traffic signal at this intersection. However, the only way to determine whether or not that is factual is to, in fact, do that. During the last little bit of research, we noted in regards to the warrant, which there are 9 different warrants, but we're only going to concentrate on the first 4. The first one is the 8-hour vehicular volumes, determine how many vehicles are traveling through there in an 8-hour period in each one of the directions. The second one is a 4-hour vehicle volume. The third one is peak hour flow. So that is early AM or PM typically, unless you're very near a school and you have some midday activities that impact that. And the last one, which is also very important, is the pedestrian volume. That will be included, those 4 will be included in this comprehensive analysis. It should be noted that in an order to move us forward and add additional information, this agreement also will include some utility coordination, some scoping documents, and also a couple of different options in regards to turning lanes, northbound left turn to westbound Eagle Ridge Drive, or a southbound left turn from Palisades onto Palomino. That is also included in this. It's not just the warrant study, but there's some additional stuff in there that will help us bring additional information back to the council in the future to make decisions based on that information. With that, if there are any questions, I will certainly do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Justin, in the last 2 years, how many traffic accidents have been at that intersection, and how many pedestrians been hit by motor vehicles?
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, the warrant analysis will include crash data for the last 5 years. I would like to be able to bring that to you and answer that question for you tonight. However, we only have one person that does that, and that person is not available right now to provide that data.
Would Captain Kratzer have any idea, any knowledge at all about how many accidents, or is he aware that that's a problem intersection?
I'm unable to answer that question for him. He is certainly free to do so if he would like.
My quick answer is I don't have that data, Vice Mayor.
How long have you been in town, Captain?
A little over 2 years now.
Okay, in the 2 years that you've been in town, does that intersection, without having analytics, does that intersection come to mind as something you hear on the radio as having a high traffic accident rate or pedestrian struck by motor vehicle?
No, I can't say that it does. I don't know the crash data there, but it doesn't come to mind as one of the frequent intersections we deal with for traffic accidents.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any more questions? Yes, Councilman.
So Justin, if, assuming we approve the study and it comes back and a couple of warrants are met and we don't do anything, is there any ramifications there? Or I don't know if that's a legal question, but, I mean, are you forced to act on? You know?
I don't dispense legal advice.
Well, I looked over that way too, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I don't know that if we come back with a study that necessarily obligates us to install anything there. I don't think that's where we go, but it would indicate potentially the need for a light. I don't think that it would give rise to an obligation if that's the question.
I mean, there's a lot more, I mean, this warrant study, it's not just about accidents, it's about various factors. I mean,
Indeed, Madam Mayor and Council Member, we're going to be primarily looking at 4 of the available 9 warrants. The remaining warrants are related to schools, at-grade crossing. For those of you unfamiliar, that is where a train track crosses an intersection, and we're not going to be impacted by those 2. It should be noted that when all of this data is collected, that we will then refer back to the manual on uniform traffic control devices that provides guidance in regards to, now that you've met A, B, or C, these are your options. And again, there's an incredible amount of data needed in order for us to determine what is necessary to make this intersection safe. Not saying that it's not, but that's the intent.
I also would like to just kind of address some of the other concerns. So the development agreement that we have with the hotel there, they were asked to do a traffic study, and if they build another phase, they will be a partner on that cost sharing for that. However, it is appearing that, we're obligated as a town to put that in that location. MCO Properties years ago gave the town a pro rata share of what it believed at that time was its share for putting a traffic signal at that intersection. So I believe that I'm a data person. I like to see the data, and that's why we want to get the study done. But I also believe that we've made some commitments to the development in that area that at some point we are going to have a traffic signal there. The other thing I'd like to just point out too is that we frequently are very fortunate to get what's called closeout money through MAG. It's federal dollars that flow through the town. You recall when we were over budget on when Fountain Hills shoulder widening came back, we were able to get close to $500,000 there to help get that project finished off. I'm also thinking that there's going to be the possibility when they divvy up these federal dollars that come through, if they're shovel-ready projects, we may be able to use that kind of money to help pay for these types of things. So I think it behooves us to try to get this evaluated, and then if it comes back, the warrant is there, let's get it designed, and then let's try to collect the money before we go ahead and build it. But I do think that this is really a low-cost option. I believe we're talking a lot of money to build a traffic signal. I believe it's close to $800,000. So,
That's correct.
and we also have probably a few more years of development fees to collect before we get close to that. So, any case, I think the case is made already to do the warrant study. We just didn't do a very good job explaining this last time it came before you.
If in the future it comes back to us and you recommend a design study, go out for bid or whatever, would that be CIP money or development fee money, or don't know yet?
It could be all of it,
Okay.
or it could be the town pays a portion of it, but it's mostly a development fee. So the development fees that we have for streets really, from what I recall, is Shea Boulevard widening, I believe, and also, was it Fountain Hills Boulevard?
Palisades.
Well, at this intersection for
Oh,
the
yes.
signal, but I'm saying for widening or other improvements due to growth. So we really just have three primary areas, so this is one of them.
I have a question.
Yes,
What are
ma'am?
the time parameters on this? The time parameters for obtaining the contract and then working with them? How long is it going to be till the warrant study is completed? And then are we also looking at this in anticipation of, because of the development that's going on there, the trailhead, the houses, things like that, that we're going to see a heck of a lot more traffic at that corner, or that four-stop corner, so therefore inevitably, there's probably going to be a traffic light needed there?
Madam Mayor, council member, you are correct. I'm going to answer the first part of your question. It'll take about 90 days to gather all the information, provide that back to the town manager and staff for review, and then we'll send our comments back. Once we've reached that point, then we will certainly have a considerable amount of data. The intent is to also project future traffic flows based on development. And that falls under the MAG 2040, the year 2040, and that data and analysis will also be used based on archival studies and the rate of growth, not only just for this area, but for also the northbound traffic that uses Palisades to head on north into the Verdes.
So is that information going to be detailed in the warrant report so that we can take a look at what is going to be, anticipated? Because we can look at today all we want, but
Right.
what we're really looking at is anticipated. So is that information going to be there
Yes.
for us to
Yes, ma'am.
evaluate?
In fact, I'm sorry for interrupting, but yes, that's a very good question, and the report will come back to council, and I believe the engineer that is going to be the principal on this, that will do this, will present this to council, and they will do modeling. So they'll look at the current traffic counts and what basically they anticipate once Adaro is built out, what the impacts will be. Also, right now, we're not really getting the hotel patronage and all that, so that's also going to be modeled and taken into consideration based on occupancy that they will have there as well.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, in the scoping fee document that I attached to the staff report, and it's a lot of line items, but it covers everything that will be included in this warrant study. And that includes the future data for outlying years.
This is actually probably a Grady question. It sounds like we did not get development fees when Marriott expanded already. What you're suggesting is that if the new phase comes to fruition, we may be able to get development fees then from Marriott.
We have actually a provision in their development agreement that has cost sharing. It does have some caps on it, so that is the case on that. Now, as far as the development fee, David, did you want to come up? I'm trying to remember if commercial properties, do they fund into the streets?
Yes.
So if we do a subsequent phase, and they may actually be able to do an offset too, to what is in the development agreement for the cost sharing too. They may say, well, we can't pay both ways. It's one or the other, right?
Right, yeah, I'm not sure about the development agreement, how that would play out, but commercial properties, as long as they're, the plans haven't been submitted under the old fees, which I
Right.
don't think is the case, but any new properties, or any new.
So I think the key to my question is, any new phase has not already been approved, so it would be coming back to us for us to have the development fees, this traffic light conversation, because if I remember correctly, this traffic light would cost about $840,000.
That's correct.
So
Yeah,
that's.
so this is all incremental. So tonight is for you to give due consideration to the warrant study. It will be reported back to you. The engineer of record will present this to you. And then you'll make a determination if you want to go forward with having staff go and have the design done on it. My take on it is the design is one of those things that you can actually future-proof and you can actually pay for it today with present value dollars, put it on a shelf, and then try to collect the money to try to build it until you have the money to, save to build that. Also, in the event we do get closeout money or some other unanticipated grants, this is perfect for that. So if you have the design already. But again, first step here is trying to demonstrate that there might be a warrant. If it doesn't meet warrant, then we're not going to bother going any further with it.
And to add to Mr. Miller's comments, in the past, we have used HISP, Highway Safety Improvement Program funding, to make changes to 12 of the 13 traffic signals that we currently have, changing all of the indications from incandescent to LED, which was a substantial contribution.
Thank you. Do we have any speaker cards? So like Peggy was mentioning, though, it's important to think of this as modeling because, if you really look at the months and months and years that MAG and the region put into Prop 400 and now the Prop 400 renewal, it's all based on that. It's all based on future. And so to your point, David, it's important to get those figures for what's going on now and then go beyond that a little bit because of the anticipated use of the intersection. Another thing, I'll get right to you, sorry, to keep in mind is that development fee money is really narrowly available as far as being able to use it. So it's not like, well, if we could, do the park or do something, it has to be based on future growth. It has to be based on, we need this because there's more population. So it's a very legitimate use of development fees. And again, we don't have a lot of ways to use development fees, and this would absolutely fall under that. Jerry?
So this is just the warrant study. What will the cost be for a design study? Any idea?
Madam Mayor, Council Member, the next phase of this, which is in their original, still remains at $50,000 for 100% design, which is an incredible amount of work because of the challenges that we have at the intersection.
So that's the actual design for another 50, not a study for a design. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think we've got this negative connotation of studying things, and I think that by you. It's just a word, but, I was joking with Grady earlier. It's like, I'd like if you have a medical problem, you want a doctor to take care of it. And in these cases, we need engineers, and, you have is an X-ray a study? So it can get ridiculous, but in these cases, when it comes to infrastructure and culverts and drainage and all of those things that we're not prepared to make those decisions here, you need that kind of guidance. So this is a step that's needed if you feel like you want to go on, and then we'll talk about the design, not the design study, and the actual building of it. So if there are no other questions, we could do a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank
I
you.
move to approve the professional services agreement C 2021-031 with Kimberly Horn and Associates for a warrant study to evaluate and document the the need for a signalized control intersection in the amount of $49,027.
Thank you.
Second.
We were on the pedestrian committee that recommended this. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed?
Nay.
Thank you very much. Our last item is the legislative agenda. Grady?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. I passed out just before the council meeting a matrix or a table it's entitled Proposed Bills in 2021 Legislative Session Impacting Fountain Hills. These are all the bills that we've discussed here at the council meeting that the council took a position of either support or opposition to. And we're going to continue to maintain this sheet, so we'll try to get this out even earlier. As you know, the challenge every day with the legislature is these bills are moving pretty quickly, almost faster in real time than what you can do to get a packet out. So we may try to get something put in the packet and then give you, just before the meeting, the latest, greatest information as of that day. Wanted to let you know that there are a couple bills that we'd like to see if we can get some council position on. One is House Bill 2623. This one is one that the League is supporting. It basically would allow cities and towns to regulate the hours of operation for fireworks. As you know, there are a number of people that have pets and animals that are concerned with fireworks going off at all hours. So all this would do is basically allow a city or town, if they wanted to, they wouldn't be able to prohibit fireworks, but they would be able to say what the end time would be, that no fireworks would be able to go off after a certain time. So that is 2623. The other one that I think is really very important because we deal with this all the time is House Bill 2804. It has to do with executive sessions. Right now there are, I believe, 8 topics that can be discussed in executive session, but right now the council can always have legal advice from the attorney on a matter, a variety of different matters. This bill, if passed, would keep it limited to only those 8 items, and the council, for instance, let's say we had an item on the agenda tonight that there was some legal question, and you always have the ability to go into an executive session to get more legal advice. The way that this bill is proposed right now, you would not be able to do that. So it's very limiting, and the idea is that the bill was supposed to create this transparency, but what it really does is it hampers the ability for local government. And I think Aaron may have some additional points on this he wants to share with you.
Mayor, Council, Grady covered it well. Your town attorney doesn't like it. That's the only additional point that I want to raise.
Well, in that case,
Yeah, I have nothing else to add, though.
Do you have any, Alan? I see that your thing is on, so I'd like to.
Yeah, a few comments. And I mentioned this to Grady before the meeting started. About 2 years ago, I authored an op-ed that was published in the Times about preemption. And that is the legislature, in their wisdom, making decisions to control how we operate. Local governments are basically the powerless pawns of the system, and would be made less and less powerful every time there's a legislative session. There's a stunning lack of trust by the legislature of our ability as elected officials to make decisions that we think are in the best interest of our citizens. Case in point was just mentioned, telling us what we can do in executive session. There are other bills that I see have been introduced by legislators at the behest of the building and construction industry. These are bills that really have nothing to do with the state. These are all hoisted on local governments throughout the state. Now, I was roundly criticized by one of our elected officials for my op-ed. And in that opposition, it was stated that, well, we've got to keep local governments from doing things that we don't like. Well, then why do we have local government? Why do we even bother? Because every time the legislature meets, they take our powers away or they change our powers. And I just felt that I had to say that because I'm so upset about it as I read about bills that are being introduced in the legislature. They don't trust us. They don't think we can make the right decisions. They don't think the citizens have a role to play other than to vote for us, which is what they ought to do. And if they don't like what we do, vote us out of office. I'm fine with that. But frankly, I'm sick and tired of the legislature sticking their nose in everything we do and trying to control what we do.
Do we want to talk about the fireworks bill? And does everybody think that they would be supportive of us putting in a position to support it, which would allow cities to prevent fireworks from going off after 10 p.m.? Doesn't mean you have to, but it's a, are you okay with that?
So that one's different than the one that was going to allow aerial fireworks?
Yeah,
right?
that was the opposed one. This one, where is it? Can't tell where it is, so, but anyway, it passed the House, so it's going over to the Senate, that's what it is. So you want to do that, or is that okay? Yeah. All right, and then the other one was the executive session one, which is a little harder to understand, but the league opposed it, and it passed committee on party line vote of 7-6. So that one would have to go to the floor of the legislature, of the House. So I think we should be, I think we should take a position against that one, if you're okay with that. Thank you. So those were really the only two that, there's just so many, but those were
Right.
the new ones. So you got that, right? Just real quickly, Alan, don't feel alone with, there's bills telling the governor that he can't do emergencies, and there's bills telling the Corporation Commission that they can't look at utilities anymore. There's bills trying to get these Board of Supervisors to hand over ballots, and so there's a lot of up and down, that the legislature has been, introducing bills, but you're right about cities and towns. Municipalities have been for, decade now at least of that. So, hopefully we can get through this session without a lot of these bills passing that are in there. Michael?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in general, I wanted to comment on this matrix you handed out. I like it, I appreciate it, and I think we should somehow keep that up because it helps kind of keep things in focus and keep them straight. I mean, obviously things do move rather quickly down there, and I understand, council wanting to give direction on certain positions, I guess, and I don't know if we can really regulate this per se or have a policy, but I felt last meeting, two issues were brought up at the meeting, which, were two bills I hadn't really heard about or knew about. And we took a vote on those. And I just felt, and I don't think it was a violation per se of any kind of open meeting law. I'm not saying that, but I just didn't like kind of being put on the spot because I didn't really know a lot about these bills. And I know, Aaron, you explained a little bit on the gun thing and et cetera, but, and again, I don't know how we can get around that, but, I almost kind of wanted to abstain because I like being prepared for meetings and reading stuff and, if we need to talk to people, answer questions, et cetera, that helps me a lot. But in that case, and if we abstain, it's basically a no vote. So I just felt kind of like put on the spot. And I know it's important we take positions on these things and hopefully it does some good, but I don't know how we can kind of prevent, last minute things coming up at a meeting like that. But,
possibly one way, council member, is that procedurally, perhaps if there's some council members feeling uncomfortable with it at the time, that they ask us to come back and staff do a briefing at the next council meeting. The only challenge with that is, as you brought up, these are moving pretty quickly sometimes. But if that makes you feel more comfortable that you're not quite ready to vote, or the consensus of the council isn't that they're feeling comfortable to vote at that time, that's maybe just the way to handle it, just like you would any other council business.
Yeah, and I didn't express it, at the last meeting, and yeah, if we wait 2 or 3 weeks, that might not be good either. I get that. But, the public doesn't know we were going to be talking about those things either, and taking a vote, I mean, it's not like a fiduciary thing where we're voting on money or contracts or anything like that. It's basically just giving direction to you. So I get all that. It's just, but I guess in the future, if I don't feel comfortable with something, I'll just say that and see what happens. But,
I think as far as what the item says, I think it's okay what we did. I'm sure it is, because
Right.
we're saying that, or any action relating to any action proposed or pending before the state legislature. And you're right, the nature of what they're doing is, it's like almost impossible to be ready. I mean, sometimes the committee's right before we start here. So you're right. I don't know whether you want to just, but I like everybody to be free to bring up if if they know about it, a bill. So maybe we can agree to not, I don't know, Aaron, can we do something after a meeting in an email sort of a deal, not where we're voting, but where we're informing, because Grady can take a position, right? I don't know, it's all kind of.
Yeah, I've been very
difficult.
careful because I want to make sure that I'm not out of sorts with the full
Yeah,
council
yeah,
on these, because I'm actually registered as a lobbyist representing the town.
that's true, yeah, because I mean, as individuals, you could take, statements, requests to speaks, and those just under yourself, and so, well, we'll think about it and see if there's anything we can do to make you more comfortable. Hopefully, it'll all be short-lived and the session will be over.
What I can suggest is, if council has any, we have these Monday briefings by the league. If you hear about a bill or something that we don't bring up, or you hear or read something else, please reach out to me and we'll research it. And then before it comes to the council, then at least we will have vetted. And if I need to get some additional information from one of the legislative analysts with the league, I can do that as well. But I think that might be the way to handle that.
yeah, I appreciate that, because, I think that would alleviate some of the personal nature of certain issues being brought up that may or may not impact municipalities so directly. There's, what record number of bills introduced, so, that we could pick any one of them and say, well, this is going to affect us. And it's like, well, so I think it's kind of league vetted and more information, to me at least, that makes more sense.
So reach out to me if there's something that you're interested in that may not be in the league bulletin, and then I can research it, and then I'll try to email the whole council what it is, and what the impacts are, and what the league's position is, or what our position could be. And then we'll bring it for discussion before the council.
Okay, that makes sense. Anything else on this item, or the discussion direction to the town manager? No? So we're going to motion to adjourn. Do I have to say anything about the executive session? I'm sorry?
I was just going to suggest we'll just recess right into executive session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we take a motion then?
At that point, we should just move to recess.
We never had an executive session.
Yeah, we should just recess into executive session, and then we'll just adjourn.
Motion to adjourn
I
at
think.
the end. Okay,
No?
well, we'll recess to
Oh,
executive
Liz
session.
is telling me no.
Well, they've been posted as two separate meetings.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
it was just a continuation from the first part of E-session.
So we just adjourn this meeting.
We adjourn
Can I
this
get a motion
meeting.
to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Okay.